It finally warns us.
Yeah, so for those of you that kind of have just come on, so Jan Bowers is out of the office today, so I'm kind of trying to run everything here. So please, please be patient with me, and hopefully it won't go too rough or anything like that. But I think I've got everything figured out. So just let me know if you have any issues in the chat box or if anything comes up.
Perfect. Well, it looks like it's a couple minutes after 4. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. My name is Mike Payne. I am the chairman for the Transportation and Mobility Commission. And today is June 1st. And let's go ahead and get this meeting started by taking roll. Jennifer, if you're playing the role of Jan this week, would you please take roll for us today?
Yeah, let me get the list up here. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Payne.
Present.
Or I should say Chair Payne. Let's see, Commissioner Valenta. Let's see, Commissioner Freyer.
Here.
Oh, welcome. It's nice to have you, Chuck. Let's see, Commissioner Rhea.
I'm here.
Commissioner McKenzie. Commissioner Herman.
Here, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you. Commissioner Ruggles.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
And Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Okay, so it just looks like we're missing Carson.
For the record, Commissioner McKenzie is had a name change, and I don't want to guess the pronunciation. Is she here tonight?
I thought it was Thana.
Oh, yes.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes. And it does not look as though she's responding, so we will consider her not here at the moment. Are you good to proceed, Jennifer?
Oh, yeah. So what do I?
I just want to make sure we had everyone accounted for.
Oh, yes. Everyone's accounted for except for Commissioner Valenta and Commissioner Thano.
Perfect. Thank you. At this time, we have, well, I'll read the public meeting preamble at this time prior to the adoption of the minutes. The role of the Transportation and Mobility Commission is to review and analyze transportation projects, policy changes, program development, and other transportation matters affecting the public right-of-way. We follow a public process, including voting on action items during which the public has an opportunity to provide additional perspectives and information. In legislative matters, the role of the commission is advisory. The Planning Commission may hold separate meetings to consider our recommendations and provide their own, and City Council may also hold separate meetings to consider our recommendations and make a final determination. The Transportation and Mobility Commission will conduct a meeting tonight and take public comments during designated times. Any written testimony received by 2 p.m. will be read into the record by staff. Callers who have pre-registered by 2 p.m. on the Transportation and Mobility Commission survey page will be called upon tonight to address the Transportation and Mobility Commission. I do understand we have some people that have registered. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Yes, we have one person that's registered so far.
Perfect. Thank you. When you are called, we will promote you to a panelist so members can see and hear you as you provide your comments. If you're providing the formal recommendation of a neighborhood association or any other affiliation, please tell us when the association voted on the matter, as well as how many people were for and against said matter. Please keep the remarks brief and to the point. We have been running with a 3-minute time limit per commenter. Remarks should be directed to the Transportation and Mobility Commission as a body, not the audience or staff, please. Please do not repeat comments that have already been provided in print or verbally. And please show respect for the people commenting tonight, whether or not you agree with the comments that are being made. So with that said, if no one has any questions to that, we will move forward with the adoption of our May minutes. The agenda says March. I think we had to approve those on our last meeting. So
Sure.
tonight,
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it looks like Commissioner Jackson raised her hand, and I missed Commissioner Ramos is also here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My comment was only about the March minutes to say that we should need to update the agenda.
Thank you.
Right. So does that need to be an official vote to that?
No,
Or-
that was just a mistake on our,
Okay.
so we can update that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so with that said, thank you, Commissioner Jackson. We will move to approve the April minutes. Those were distributed out to each of us individually earlier. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those? Has anyone not had an opportunity to review those?
So are we doing April or May? We're doing May, right?
Okay. Yes, we did not have an April meeting. So
Thank you.
again, I will
Thank
correct
you.
myself. I caught the March, I changed it to April, knowing very well that that wasn't correct. So thank you. One more time, we will move to adopt the May minutes. Has anyone not had an opportunity to review those?
Williams is so moved.
Well, I have a,
Pardon me?
I was saying I'll move that we adopt the May minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Hardy, you have a comment?
Yes, I'm in favor of adopting. I just have a question. When we have something like TIP that's a lot of detailed information, and then there is questions and discussion and response during part of that process, and it's put into not a summary, but where people from the public could go in and listen to the recording, but it seems like you have to listen to the whole recording through, like you can't just forward it. So it seems as if that when we have some really important things, that maybe there's a way we can do a little bit more of a summary and just not leave it to people, even ourselves, to have to go back through. And because I often forget what other people say, and some people have some really good questions and things, and that in just triggering, even seeing it in the notes, then I remember, but with nothing. So I if there's at all possible, maybe we can be a little bit more transparent in moving forward.
I would ask for a little bit more clarification on the transparency. Looking over the last minutes, I see where they had included some timestamps, audio recording timestamps as to certain items that were reviewed that would help speed up that process, if that's what I'm understanding. You wish to clarify?
No, it's just that in most of all the rest of our minutes, there is a summary of what people sort of say, and there isn't on this one. And so as the public, you have no idea what the discussion was to even know if you want to go in to look or to listen to the recording. And I'm not trying to be critical. I just think that if we could make it a little bit more accessible, without having to listen to the whole recording. And I have nothing more to say. That's just a comment, an observation.
and I'd have to, and I appreciate that. I'd have to defer that to city, as far as the format of the minutes being taken. Is there any comment from city on that?
Yeah, so I'm looking back at the minutes and I can go back and look to see. So I can see what you're saying in terms of like the transportation grant. Summary was pretty short. And then the tip also. So I can go back and look to see, I think because, sometimes the discussion is more extensive. That's why we have the audio recording available for the community to go in and listen to it, as well as commission members. But I can maybe see why there wasn't as much of a summary with these as in past ones.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add, I'm in agreement just because when I went back to review the minutes, I thought it seems like we did have a relatively lively discussion, and I couldn't find that in the minutes, and I didn't have time to go back and listen to the entire recording. So a little bit more would be nice.
I also agree.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely go back and add that in. So if you're not comfortable with adopting the minutes tonight, that's totally fine. So we could go back, add some additional information in and bring those back at next month's meeting.
That would certainly help the public to realize that we did have a lively discussion and didn't just listen and didn't say anything.
Okay.
Then we
So
will take.
whatever.
Go ahead.
So what I'm hearing everyone say is that the minutes seem more like seconds instead of minutes.
Mark.
Right. Welcome, Mario. So with that said, we will move to table the adoption of the May minutes until our July meeting. All in favor? Any objections?
Excuse me, Chair, if I could offer a point of clarification here. If you, as chair, if there are not the votes to approve the minutes, you can go ahead and defer that. If there's no objection, you don't need to vote on a deferral. Okay. So you can ask, unless anyone objects, I'm going to defer this item to the next meeting. Would be the easiest way to do it.
What he said. No. So we'll move to defer to the next meeting if there are no objections. Anyone in objection? So that has been tabled till the next meeting, and we will move on with our agenda items for this evening. Next on the table for the agenda, we have for an action item, the collaboration compact. This was discussed on our last meeting, and it was tabled at that time or moved to further review. I just lost everybody. There we go. So with that said, the information that was provided in the minutes were that each of us were going to be given a couple more weeks to review the collaboration compact and add any additions, corrections, or updates to that we wished or saw as necessary. With that said, I believe that Jennifer or city staff has collaborated this, put it all together with the changes that we're seeing. I believe what we're seeing in red was the changes that were submitted for our review.
Yes. So, go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
Go ahead.
Well, let me hear what you have to say, and then I can give you my comment.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, so these were comments that were provided by Commissioner Ruggles. And so I just went through and added these. So the red underlined text is her recommendations or her suggestions on additions to the compact. So that's everything that was included in the handout that you were provided. And I don't know, Commissioner Ruggles, if you want to provide any kind of further backgrounds or information on the suggested changes that you had, or Do you want to go ahead and go first, Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, if that would be okay. It was mostly, not changing much, just asking a question about the overall document. So when I was reading it, I was having a lot of trouble with it, but then I was trying to understand, is this, essentially it's a compact we're all agreeing to, I assume. And so it's, having said that, it should read more like, for instance, we agree to be good stewards, make decisions. Can we go back up to the, so that they each read as if, so the first one reads great. We agree to be good stewards of the environment. But then the second one goes, we agree to economically feasible, or I would say we agree to make decisions that are economically feasible. Is that where this is kind of going? Like we would be able to read it and say, I kind of agree to this. I mean, or I do agree to this, and that's why I'm on this commission. But the way it reads right now, some of them seem like things that we're doing or agreeing to, and other things just seem like statements. So I just was hoping for a consistent, as you know, and bringing in an English teacher to say, this needs to just, it needs to read consistently as if they are all items that would be actionable, that we would be participating in or agreeing to. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Can I jump in? May I be recognized? Commissioner Ruggles here. Absolutely, the parallelism, what I gave Jennifer was just, you know, they were not comprehensive. They were just things that came up for me that I wanted to possibly discuss with my fellow commissioners. So, but you know, if we just needed to make them parallel or discuss whatever we need to do, but I absolutely agree with Leah's suggestion.
Well, I agree with both Leah and, I mean, with Commissioner Ruggles and Commissioner Jackson, because it doesn't read well. And I think Commissioner Ruggles has put in some of that, the parts that really give it the depth and the meaning and all that, and what we're really looking for with equity and inclusion and diversity. And she's provided some of that language. How we put all that together, I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
So
I
I
would-
also
I went
for,
through- yeah.
my mom was an English major and I got whipped up pretty much as a kid. There's a lot of stuff that I would really want to edit a little more tightly, take away some redundancies. Another observation is there was a comment, Daria, that says, you know, the recent, you know, Climate Commitment Act from the governor. Well, how's that going to read in 5 years' time? Which governor? What recent thing?
Do I have that in here?
Yeah, it was one of the comments.
Where?
You know, so things like that. Oh, future mindset. You know, things like that, I think, need to be tightened up to include the gist of it without getting into super specifics.
Yeah, totally agree, Ken. It should not be dated, and we're looking for the values that undergird these things.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah, there's a couple of things for me on here when I reviewed it earlier today. Meet the mobility needs for today's residents. Well, what about future residents? Why we should be thinking long-term, not just, we should be thinking short-term and long-term, not just short-term. And I thought I agree with what everyone else was saying, that there's a lot of redundancy in there. There's one under the holistic environments, I think it is.
Chair, can I interject here for a moment?
I was actually, I have some thoughts on this very same subject as well. So I'll go ahead and defer to you as first there.
Thank you, Chair. So just to make sure that the members understand, that when we're talking, and this is going to be nearly impossible for, hang on one second. So as the members are talking, it's going to be impossible for members of the public to follow who's saying what.
Right.
I'm frankly having difficulty following. During past meetings, we've actually been pretty good about making sure that the chair recognizes that the person wants to speak and that the chair can identify that person as, okay, Commissioner Ruggles, go ahead. Commissioner Hardy, go ahead. That's really going to help this conversation. So that's the first point, is to make sure that we don't start to lose that, even if no matter what we're talking about. And then second is that this document is something for you just to use internally. It's just for your use. It's not for really the public to look at. It's just how you want to guide yourselves. If you all understand it and are in accordance with those goals, however they may be grammatically phrased, it's up to you to decide whether or not you are okay with those principles. And then down the line, you can look at revising them and refining it. If you're not comfortable with it the way it is, then that's your decision to go ahead and do further refining before you adopt it. But those are those two things. First is probably the most important. Make sure that we keep some kind of order to this process, because especially when we're just doing this remotely for now, it's really difficult for everyone to follow it when it's just kind of some random voices coming from different places. Thank you, Chair.
Agreed. And thank you for that clarification, David. So to that extent, I would like to just kind of shift a minor gear real quick and defer to Jennifer. Have we, as a commission, given any more consideration to a date for our retreat? My opinion as the chair is this would be something that we should either schedule Kevin to come back and work with us again, because there's such a variance of opinions, and it's not something that I feel that we should try to come to a conclusion on in today's meeting with the city and the other topics that we're trying to cover today.
So
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we don't have a date yet set for when the retreat will be. It most likely will be sometime this fall, is kind of what we had scheduled out. So it'd be a few months before we would have another kind of retreat or, a check-in in terms of the onboarding and how that's gone. So I know that you had a pretty lengthy discussion with Kevin about this at the last onboarding session that you had. So it's kind of, we can send it out again and people are welcome to review it and provide more comments. Staff could take a stab at kind of, rewording it and reformatting it, sending it back out. It's kind of whatever you would like to do.
So nobody's raised their hands for any other input here. I am going to move that we table this again, defer this to next month so that we have had a chance to review this together, and not in this public format. Commissioner Jackson, your comments?
So I would just ask that we set some sort of goal as to how each person should add their comments or do any kind of revisions so that when staff takes them in, because otherwise we're going to have how many different people and how many different colors on one document. So
would we
Chair, can I offer
you.
a suggestion?
Yes.
Perhaps
Please.
There is the ability for a handful of members, less than a quorum, to meet to work on items. If you think that there are maybe 2 or 3 members who wouldn't mind collaborating offline to address maybe some of the things that were raised during this discussion just now, you as a body can appoint, like I said, 2 or 3 people perhaps to revise this, and maybe as a subcommittee work on something as a document, and you authorize them to bring something back to the best of their ability. That might be a way to address this. Tiger, seriously?
So I think that's a great idea, and I appreciate your input there. I would move that, at this point, I hear Leah, I hear Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Ruggles, Commissioner Williams are the first 3 to speak to this. Are you 3 willing to tackle this and review this for us?
What about Commissioner Rea?
I see a 4th. We need 3. or are we going to be in a majority with 4?
Sorry, let me look to staff. What's the membership total on this? Is it 11?
Yes, it's 11.
So 4 would still be okay.
So then I would include Commissioner Rea. Are there any others that are wishing or willing or wanting to be a part of this, or any objections that I hear to this?
I would be willing to be a part of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Valenta. We will keep you in mind as a backup. At this time, Commissioner Williams, go ahead. Your comment.
Oh, I'd be willing to cede my spot to Mr. Valenta.
I thought you were,
So, Jennifer, do you have a record of this? We have Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Valenta, Commissioner Rea, and Commissioner Ruggles that will volunteer as the subcommittee to review these and bring this back as a whole to the commission in our July meeting.
Okay.
Any objections? Perfect. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to bring back to us. Commissioner Jackson, you still have your hand up?
yes, I was just going to suggest that perhaps if we can get it done before that, we could send it out to the commission. Would that be an appropriate thing to do, or just to save some extra discussion time?
So I would like for you, the four of you, to collaborate on that, review, and have a timeline that you guys can submit that back to us. Hopefully, say within the next 2 weeks. That'll give everyone else an opportunity to review that based on that very comment. Commissioner Williams.
The question for council is it okay to communicate by email or phone or whatever to this, select subcommittee without running afoul of whatever rules and regs about open meetings and such?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, David, please.
So yes, all the communications of the subcommittee, as long as it's confined to just that topic, then you can go ahead and do whatever you want, however you feel best to get it done. Calling, emailing, meeting in person if you're all vaccinated, however works best for you. And then as long as you come up with something as one subcommittee, one group, and then email that to the chair and to staff, that can be distributed to the members as long as nobody else talks about it until we come back. It's on an agenda for another meeting. But the actions of the communications of the subcommittee members amongst themselves, no, that is not a meeting of the body. So that can be as informal as you would like it to be. Thank you.
So David, if Commissioner Williams is still interested in participating, that would bring us to 5. Are we still okay at 5?
I would suggest that we stick with 4 or fewer.
Okay.
I'm okay to let Ken take it over if you'd like to. I don't want to have to push that number forward.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask if staff might be able to, just to make this more efficient, could we be given a editable version of this so we could all add our notes?
Yes, definitely. So I can send out a Word version, and then I'm happy to help set up the meeting. So I can send out a doodle poll to try to find a meeting time that'll work for everybody, and can support that through Zoom if that's helpful. I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
So our next meeting is scheduled for July 6th. Would it be reasonable to expect something from the subcommittee on that by July 1st for the rest of us to review? Would that give everyone enough time? Any objections to that timeline? David, for input and clarification, is there anything that we need to do to to determine the legality of the subcommittee, or is it?
So so Chair, if I would, if you could just ask staff to repeat the members of the subcommittee and their purpose, and I think that time frame that you established, and then the body can vote on that. And people who would be appointed to the subcommittee are allowed to vote also, so that nobody needs to worry about whether they could or could not vote on it.
Okay, so I have for a subcommittee to review the collaboration compact and provide edits to that and bring that back to the full commission by July 1st. I have Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Rea, Commissioner Ruggles, and Commissioner Williams. Is that who we decided?
Carson's going to do it.
Okay.
You volunteered first, so I don't want to take that from you. I know.
No, I'm happy to. I think you can bring a good perspective to it.
Okay. So then the four that I have are Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Rea, Commissioner Ruggles, and Commissioner Valenta.
And we will expect a collaboration by July 1st, return to the body,
Yes.
the commission.
How do you guys want me to be acknowledged? I've raised my hand and I've clicked on raising the hand, but nope, but I'm not getting called on. So
Commissioner Rea, go ahead, please.
I'd suggest that we meet within the next 2 weeks, as you originally stated, so we get this done and out to the members so they have a chance. If we do it on July 1st, you're doing it right before a holiday, and that's not going to leave a lot of time for review and comment by the remaining members of the commission.
Well, that was our designation for a time, to have it returned. That would give you guys more than one opportunity if you needed to review, but we can move that date up if no one's objected to it.
And Chair, if I may, at this point,
please.
The date by which you sort of suggested it be returned, at an end date by which it be returned to members, the commission, the subcommittee could meet as soon as this meeting is over. They could meet tonight and they could meet tomorrow and the next day and get it done and send everything out to members, by Friday. Whatever time frame they come up with is their own time frame. All that you're doing is setting an end, like no later than. But
right.
That date, again, that's up to you to decide. But that doesn't mean that the subcommittee, they can meet whenever and wherever. Once they're designated, that's their sort of free reign.
So we'll leave the meeting time up to you, and we'll leave the deadline for which it needs to be committed or submitted to the commission by July 1st.
Okay.
Anyone wish to move that this, make a motion that we vote this in?
Williams, so moved.
Commissioner Jackson? Commissioner Jackson, I'm assuming I need to hear. Do we have a second to that?
Valenta to second.
Thank you, Commissioner Valenta. Jennifer, can you help us with the vote, please?
Yes, I can do that. And can you remind me, David, do I say who did the first or last? I'm sorry. Can you remind me how I called that?
Yeah, usually you go with all the members and then save the second for the second to last, and then the maker of the motion for last.
Okay.
That's just a convention.
Okay, thank you. Yep. All right, let's see. So we've got Commissioner Freyer.
Yes.
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes.
Commissioner Rea.
Yes.
Let's see, Commissioner or Chair Payne.
Yes.
Commissioner Herman.
Yes.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Yes.
Commissioner Hardy.
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
And then Commissioner Valenta.
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. That's a unanimous passing vote that the 4 commissioners named previously will take this as a subcommittee action item and return this by July 1st on the collaboration compact. Thank you for taking on this project, you guys, commissioners. With that said, we are expecting a 3-hour meeting tonight on the agenda, or somewhere close to that. So I will be looking to probably take a real quick break somewhere around the 5:30, 6 o'clock hour when we find time to do that. So everybody can refill the water bottle or cool off for a moment if we need to. So with that said, I would like to move on to our informational item, the 4:30 slot on our agenda for this evening. I do know that we have some visitors from the city that are here to speak on the transportation improvement program again. Chris, is that your level
Rebecca,
or your area of expertise this evening?
I think Rebecca is going to start the presentation and then I'll finish it up.
Okay. Rebecca Kennedy, the floor
Hi.
is yours, please.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Okay, so I know that your last meeting, Chris was here to review the Transportation Improvement Program, the next 6-year plan with you, and particularly the interim prioritization process that we went through this year. And I know there were some questions about that, about the ability of the commission to influence the TIP. And I think in particular, some potential confusion or questions about the role of the TIP and whether it is really a policy document and a place where policy is made, or an implementation tool that should reflect current policy, and sort of where you have the ability to really engage in and influence the actual policy discussion. And I think, we haven't, because the commission is new and we don't sort of have the, the same, I would just say, rhythm of things that come to you, and you haven't seen all these things, year after year. I think probably we should have contextualized it a little more. And so that's what Chris and I are here to do tonight. And then also provide a little more information related to the interim prioritization and how it was developed and why it was developed that way, and what it means, how long it'll be in place, and what will take its place, and how you will be influencing and very essential to influencing and helping shape what will take its place as a more permanent policy prioritization system. So really quickly, I'm just going to kind of go over how comprehensive planning works and how we move kind of down the spectrum from policy to implementation tools and to like phased implementation of actual projects. My dog just came downstairs. I think he's hot. So if you see a dog in the background, excuse me. So we take our guidance from a policy standpoint from several key documents. The first one is the city strategic plan. It's a 5-year plan. It's updated every 5 years by the city council, and it provides very high level strategy guidance on a variety of topics. The current version ends at the end of this year, so an update process is underway. It has 10 key goal areas. One is about our transportation system and having it be the safest and most resilient transportation system we can build. And then there are individual actions under the different goals related to things like maintaining our streets, building more complete streets, reducing collisions, ensuring safety, and those types of things. The comprehensive plan is another policy document. We update it generally every 8 years, but it is the citywide document that guides how the city grows and develops over time. So how we accommodate increasing population, how we address, where we have density, where we kind of, maintain single family neighborhoods, different zoning districts and comprehensive plan designations. and things like that. But it does provide a lot of guidance from a policy standpoint about how we want things to develop. So there are goals around things like connectivity, safety, about the ability to have, sorry, my dog is very old and he's just going to wander around, about the ability to move safety and take other modes. And then, as you are aware, we have our complete streets policy, and this is a standalone policy that will, as we update the strategic plan, the comprehensive plan, and the TSP, be integrated into those documents, as well as the implementation tools that flow out of those documents. And so, some examples of implementation tools. One is the Transportation Improvement Program, which is required by federal and state law and allows us to go after grants, but is primarily just a list of projects that we are going to advance. It is an implementation tool. And other examples of that include our Transportation Development Review. So it's a program where we review every development project that comes into the city for compliance with our transportation policies and standards. Another tool is our transportation standard details. So they're cross sections that show how you build different types of streets, arterials, collectors, neighborhood streets, etc. So just really want to emphasize that the TIP is an implementation tool, and it will be updated to reflect the policy that comes out of the transportation system plan, which you are now working on. And then at the very end is phase implementation of projects, and I will, in a couple slides, go over that more a little bit. Next slide, please. So just a tiny bit more on comprehensive planning. We look at transportation and land use planning in tandem. So you are currently working on the transportation system plan. That is the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. It will be adopted into the comprehensive plan by reference. And it is actually the first major element that is being updated as part of a large overhaul of the transportation system plan that has to be completed by June of 2025. There are many other elements that will go before different boards and commissions. The Planning Commission has a significant piece of it. The Parks and Rec Advisory Board has a significant piece of it because there is a Parks Comprehensive Plan that is also adopted by reference. But we integrate these things because, as you all know, land use and transportation go together. They facilitate or hinder one another. And then we also have other citywide planning efforts that provide policy guidance that are more geographically focused than some of our citywide plans like the comp plan or the TSP. So we have sub-area plans. Some of you I know are familiar with the Heights District Plan. There are transportation specific recommendations there. Commercial corridor strategy, which is focused right now on the Evergreen and Grand corridors. Basically between Evergreen, between Grand and the Fort, and then Grand south of Mill Plain. But those have specific transportation recommendations that will support the land use and community development, open space recommendations that are also in there. And then as part of the transportation system plan, we will be updating a key implementation tool, which are our transportation standard details, which show how you build streets. How wide are your lanes? How wide are your sidewalks? What do your bike facilities look like? What's your planter strip look like? How wide is that? How are you buffering? Do you have on-street parking? And it will be more land use responsive. So instead of just saying, is it an arterial street or collector street? Or is it in a sub area where we have a specific standard? It will say, what are the land uses around it? Is it primarily residential? Is it primarily commercial? Is it a mix? Is it employment focused? And what types of mobility needs will those uses generate? And so that's a really important implementation tool that's going to come out of the TSP. And again, standard details are not a policy making, just like the TIP, they're not a policy making space. They're a tool that should reflect policy. And because the TSP is an overhaul of all our transportation policies, that is where you can really influence that. And then as we move through implementation of that, all our tools will be updated to reflect that, including the TIP, including our standard details. Next slide, please. So Our TSP will create, as I mentioned, a transportation vision that looks at 2040. So it's a 20-year plan for the city's transportation system. You all are obviously an integral part of the process for that and will weigh in on all the key decisions. I know you've already received recent information this year on various parts of it, including the equity analysis and our collision dashboard. And you will continue to weigh in on those policies. We're looking obviously to balance the need of all people who use the system. I know you're all aware of this. And then it'll outline projects and policies that enhance the quality of life via the transportation system. Next slide, please. And so you all are aware of this, but one of the key elements, and again, this is an implementation tool, are the 7 modal elements. They will guide us from implementation. They'll also provide some policy that shows us, okay, what are the key sort of routes for different modes? Where do they conflict? Where do we have to prioritize one over the other? And then that will inform the prioritized tip, the process by which we prioritize capital projects in our 6-year plan. I mentioned the new street standard details, and then again, we implement through development projects as well. When you come in to build a building, you usually have to do some sort of street improvement, whether it's just a sidewalk or you have to actually build a half street or full street improvement, depending on where you're at. So that's another way that we implement our policies it's another tool. Next slide, please. And then you all are familiar with this, but we have a TSP plan underway. We have done some outreach. Obviously, there was quite a pause due to the pandemic, and we kind of had to regroup in the middle of last year and start again. We've really just looked at the existing conditions and getting feedback based on those existing conditions to see if they reflect people's experience with the transportation system. And then we're right now at this sort of goal setting place where it's the vision, the goals focused on equity outreach, and you'll move through though solutions, including projects, programs, and policies. We'll get input on that and towards implementation. So funding strategies, updating our street standards, monitoring our other tools that I've mentioned and updating those as needed. Next slide, please. And then Chris is going to go over this, or I know Chris went over this with you at your last meeting in some detail, but it's just want to reiterate, the tip is not where we make policy. It should reflect policy. And right now we're in a process through the TSP of updating all our policies. And so what we have included in the tip and the prioritization that we have done, and Chris will say more about this, reflects what we know of our current policies, our council priorities, things like that. But it does not reflect an updated overall comprehensive and cohesive transportation system plan and all the policies that go with that. Once we have that, that tip will get updated and you all will be part of that. Next slide, please. And then this is, I believe, my last slide, but I do think it's important just to kind of show like how a project moves through a process. And so our transportation system plan will identify key projects. Our strategic plan currently identifies a few key projects and likely will continue to do so in the future. It is a way for council to signal to us that these things need to get done. And then our sub-area and corridor plans also have key projects or most of them have key projects and policies. Like we don't have a key project here, but if you do something here, in this one area of a sub area, do it like this. Those all flow into the transportation improvement program, which again is one of the key implementing tools we have. And then when we have a project opportunity, when we have a way to implement a project, whether we know there's a grant application out that it would score well and be competitive for through our capital program, through our pavement management program, they're going to do pavement work. So we have an opportunity to go in and change the roadway in some way because it's a clean slate, or through any of our other ongoing programs like neighborhood traffic calming programs, et cetera. When we identify that opportunity, we look to the tip. What are the projects? And for the first time ever this year, how are they prioritized? Previously, it was just a big list, and this is the first year we've prioritized anything. And when we do that, then we actually move into project specific planning and design work and eventually construction. So we do the planning, analysis, and outreach. We look at conceptual design and then final design, right of way, permitting, and then construction. So the tip is actually, given that it's an implementation tool, one of sort of the last steps in moving from you're on a list, you've been identified, there's some policy guidance supporting a project to that project being implemented. So it's a key tool, but still an implementation tool. And again, just want to emphasize that we, before I pass it off to Chris, have never had a ranked tip before. And so this year we really looked at how can we institute a ranking system that responds to council direction to do that in the absence of a cohesive policy that has come out of a fully updated transportation system plan. Because again, we're just not there yet. Once we have that, our tip will reflect that policy guidance. So now I'll turn it over to Chris Malone. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca, and good afternoon, commission members. Yeah, just one point of clarification. We didn't have a ranked system prior to this year, but through our experiences, we knew which projects scored well with granting agencies. And so we were pretty opportunistic of going after projects that we knew would score well with grants. So in essence, that was kind of a ranking system because we knew which projects would score well and then we could move forward with those projects. But it was, like Rebecca said, it wasn't reflecting necessarily the policies that council had put into place. So we wanted to kind of get more in alignment with that. And as Rebecca said, that'll help moving forward. And so we wanted to share with you guys a little bit more about this interim process that we went through and allow the commission members to ask questions if they wanted to. Hopefully the commission members got a letter that was sent to council. I had asked Jennifer to forward that letter to the commission members so that they could read through kind of the process that was done for this interim prioritization. So hopefully that helped kind of explain a little bit of it to you. Some of this will be repeat, but I think it's worth kind of going over. And then, like I said, at the end, we can field some questions from commission members if needed. So we wanted to do this interim process to make sure we were in better alignment with our policies and goals. And it also allowed us staff to kind of do a practice run of our projects and see what works and what doesn't work and what's easier to easier ways to score a project and more objective ways to score projects. So we wanted to go through this process to see what tweaks could be done, knowing that it was going to be revised and improved upon when we go through the transportation system plan update. So we did do this interim process, and because it's interim, we just did. There's three lists of projects in the tip. There's a funded list, a partially funded list, and an unfunded list. And we only scored the funded and the partially funded projects. The unfunded projects will be scored when the transportation system plan update, when the revised prioritization process is in place. Next slide, please. So what we did is staff worked with a consultant that had done this with other agencies, and we kind of got together and looked at the comprehensive plan policies, the strategic goals. So Rebecca mentioned both those in her opening slide. There's another set of policies that wasn't mentioned, and those are financial policies. So each biennium, so every 2 years, the city adopts a budget. And when they adopt the budget, they update the policies of how they create the budget. And the policies obviously talk about debt and how much reserve do you want to have, so financial stuff. But the financial policies also get into things like asset management. How are you going to take care of your assets? And then this year, City Council implemented climate action policies, equity policies, and safety policies in those financial policies. And so when you look at the comprehensive plan the financial policies, and the strategic goals, there, and it's specific to transportation, there's 8 what we call policy priorities that kind of rose to the top. And so I'll touch on those on the next slide and explain a little bit more about each of those policy priorities. But you have to figure out a way to score projects against those policy priorities by using certain criteria. And then when you add all those points up after you score the project, you end up with a score of 0 to 100, 100 being the highest. And in essence, it's trying to align those projects better with the council adopted policies and goals. One thing we did learn as we went through the process was it worked out much better when you score large arterial type improvement projects against other large arterial improvement projects, and then score like multimodal, smaller multimodal projects against other multimodal, and same with signal against signal. And the reason for that is, you know, these large arterial projects are addressing a lot of the policies when they get constructed, because they're addressing multimodal by putting in bike lanes and pedestrian facilities. They're addressing congestion management because they're reducing congestion. They're helping with economic development because they're providing access to new business opportunities. So you can kind of see how when you do a large arterial, it's scoring well because it hits a lot of the policies. Whereas a multimodal project, when you're doing sidewalk or bike lanes, those are pretty focused policies. So it's maybe addressing a couple different policies, but the arterial project is addressing more of them, so they tend to score better. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention too is our granting agencies that we work with, they often they have different buckets of money for these different categories. So they'll have a bucket of money for large arterial projects, a different bucket of money for like multimodal improvements, and then a different bucket of money for signal improvements. So it lines up well with our granting agencies. Next slide, please. So those 8 policy priorities, when you look at transportation and the current policies and goals, there's 8 that kind of rose to the top, and those are safety, obviously, you know, crashes and pedestrian and bicycle safety, right? And then there's equity, which is looking, and right now through the transportation system plan, there is a draft version of how we can look at equity in the city. And we utilize that draft map to say, do we have a transportation project that's next to or within some of these vulnerable communities? And if so, then that scored more points. And then climate or environment. And so basically the projects that have less of an impact on the environment scored better. We have the multimodal criteria, which is obviously trying to install more bike lanes, more pedestrian facilities. So if a project does that, they score better. Economic development, if a project is near an adopted sub-area plan or on an arterial street, those are helping to spur economic development opportunities, so they score better. The congestion management, if it's reducing congestion on a street, then it scores better. Project viability has to do with, is there funding in place? Did we get a grant for the project? Is the project helping other agencies, for example, Washington State Department of Transportation or the City of Camas or Clark County? If so, then it scored more points. And then taking care of what we have. So if we're having a street that we're going to redo the pavement on it, or we're going to redo sidewalks on it and basically prolong the life of our asset, then it scored more points. So that's kind of those are the policy priorities that we scored our projects against. Next slide, please. And then the next couple of 3 slides here have the actual scores for the projects. And this first slide is the capacity, the large arterial type projects. So when you score them against each other, you can see that First Street was the highest scoring. There's 2 phases of First Street. There's a west phase and an east phase, and those both scored the highest of all the projects. Next slide, please. Again, those First Street, all those arterial projects are, usually improving a street with multiple, increased lanes, bicycle facilities. pedestrian facilities, street lighting. They're correcting crash problems along that arterial. So that's why they scored pretty well. Then this next slide has to do with multimodal projects. So these are more geared towards sidewalk and bicycle type improvements. The one caveat here is you can see the highest scoring project there is the transportation system plan update. And that's because the TSP update will touch on all things. I mean, it's more than just multimodal. It touches on all things that have to do with transportation, whether it be congestion management, economic development, safety. So that's why it scored so highly, because it touches all of those things. Next slide. And then this is the scoring for the signal projects. And you can see that the scores are quite a bit lower than, say, take, for example, the arterial type projects. But it gives you an idea of where how the signal projects rank against each other. Next slide. Okay, so let's change gears just a little bit. And then this is my last slide, and then we can open it up for question and answer. But this is kind of a draft proposal that staff wanted to show the commission members and see if it works good or is in alignment with what the commission members are thinking. Keep in mind, this year, the commission, I think, just started. The first meeting was maybe December or January. So there was still, the commission was fairly new. There was still a lot of learning going on about transportation. But in the meantime, we had our transportation improvement program that was on a schedule because the state law says it has to be adopted by July 1st. So all of that, I just want to bring it up to the commission members that we didn't involve the commission this year like we wanted to, just because we didn't have the time and the commission was fairly new. But next year, we really want to involve the commission more. And this is kind of our draft schedule that we put in place. So I'll throw it out there. What we're talking about is maybe like late this year, 2021, staff would provide the commission with the projects and the scoring that goes along with those projects. And then in advance of a meeting, and then staff would come to the next meeting and try and have a question and answer and back and forth about the list of projects. And based on that feedback, staff would go back, and then in early 2022, we would be able to prepare a first early draft of the document. And again, come back, provide that early draft of the document to the commission, and then come back to attend another meeting where we could talk about projects that are proposed to be added to the list, removed, or changed for description or whatever scope of work. And then based on feedback from the commission there, we would have one final touch point in spring of 2022, where we would kind of bring a more finalized version of the document. We would provide that in advance of the meeting, and then show up to the meeting and just be able to answer or get any feedback and make any changes, last minute changes from the commission members before we go to council. Ultimately, we would like to get a commission endorsement of the document that basically we could say to council, the commission endorses the document and recommends approval. So that's kind of where we'd like to get to next year. And like I said, this is just a draft proposal. If there's a different schedule that the commission would like to do, we can certainly do that. It was just something to throw out there for discussion points. The one last thing I wanted to mention, I know the TSP, the Transportation System Plan, is currently underway, and it's a long process. There's a lot of public involvement. There's a lot of moving pieces that need to be implemented. And so I just want the commission to be aware that we may not have the updated prioritization process in time for next year's TIP, depending on how it goes with the TSP update. So we might use the current scoring methodology that we used, maybe with some tweaks here and there based on your feedback. We might need to use that for next year's version of the TIP, just because the TSP may not be fully ready by then. But anyway, last thing I wanted to mention, and with that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission members may have.
guess I should unmute myself before I start talking. Thank you, Chris. That was very informative, and I appreciate you as well, Rebecca, on bringing us up to speed on that. The hands are raising fast. Since he is willing to take some questions, Commissioner Rea, I see you. You have a question for Chris Malone?
I have to unmute there. So in reviewing this document earlier, Chris, it appeared that you guys are using some kind of a weighted average. So you're not going through all 6 of those criteria with equal weight, which I think, did I see that right?
Yeah, so the way it works in that memo that that you guys had that went to council, kind of the way to think about it is in there was an example scoring sheet for First Street. And
yeah,
as you go through there, you can see, like, for example, safety has a maximum of 18 points. Equity has a maximum of 15 points. Multimodal has a maximum of 14 points. Climate has 13. Taking care of what we have is 11. Congestion management is 10. Economic development is 10. Project viability is 9. So that in it is a kind of a de facto way of doing a weighted average, because the ones that are more important are worth have more possible points, if that makes sense.
So why would I don't know, we might be getting too deep into the weeds here, but I'm trying to understand why weight was given to more to some and less to another. You know, as an example, the project viability, if it has the least amount of weighting, and yet that has the greatest amount of impact on whether a project can be successfully undertaken.
So let me preface that, we are open to feedback, and if the commission feels like maybe these weightings or priorities should be changed a little bit, we're open to that. I can tell you that the process we went through, and again, this was with a consultant, they basically surveyed 15 approximately members of staff, from civil engineers to transportation planners to managers. And they basically laid out these 8 priorities. And they said, if it were up to you, what would be your highest priority, second highest priority, third highest priority, et cetera, going down the list. And so they took it, that was how they arrived at the weightings, is that overall safety rose to the top as the most important.
I agree.
And then equity was next, and then multimodal, and then climate. So basically the points were awarded just based on what the experts in the transportation field felt were the most important.
Maybe I can just add, Chris, this is Rebecca, Commissioner Rea, that it's not staff's personal opinions that are reflected. It's the policy direction that we have received from our council. So when we went through a budget process last year, their priorities were climate, equity, and safety. And that is reflected in our rankings. So it's not just what people feel, or at all really what people feel. It's with our professional expertise, and given the policy direction we have from our council, how should these be weighted? And again, it was the first year, and it was a tight timeline, but we can certainly discuss weighting in the next round for the next year's 6-year program.
Sounds good. My second question was, one of the priorities is taking care of what we have. And one of my beefs with the city has been sometimes we've taken money from maintenance and moved it into other areas. And so maintenance has gotten deferred, and my concern there is that we're not putting enough emphasis on maintenance, and that's a short-term strategy creating a longer-term problem. And as part of the transportation improvement plan, I don't see there's nothing in there really even addressing maintenance. And I don't know if that's appropriate, but there seems to be a high focus on capital projects, and I don't see any focus on maintenance as part of transportation improvement.
Yeah, the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, is really supposed to be geared towards capital projects.
Okay.
The operations and maintenance side of things, you know, those are like, let's take the biggest example is pavement, right? We spend the most money taking care of our pavements, and rightfully so. But that is included in the document. But even that is really considered more operational and maintenance and not so much capital work. But we included it because it's such a large dollar value. And the other thing I'd like to add is that when we do these capital projects, they're really investing in the infrastructure. I mean, a lot of times it's replacing infrastructure and putting in new stuff that will last longer. So a lot of these capital projects are addressing, you know, taking care of what we have.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ruggles, you got a question?
You know, honestly, I appreciate this effort so much. I feel deluged with this information, and I don't quite still understand. I did send some questions on about how the criteria was designed and who was scoring it. So maybe I need to know a little bit more about your consulting firm, you know, and how exactly, what was the data? So how exactly were the points awarded? And so I have these questions, and I can actually put them in the chat, I guess. But, you know, I also want to know what organization weighed in as stakeholders and then agreed upon the selected criteria? And how does this whole process exactly comport with diversity, equity, and inclusion directives? And what set of measures and metrics were endorsed by experts in this germanely related field? And so how do we, you know, none of us are experts. I mean, you're the experts. So the idea of being able to get a summary that, you know, is for people that have, you know, a relative intelligence to be able to understand your expertise as it relates to these ideas, because I still don't understand that. I appreciate getting the big picture and understanding how these relate to each other, but I'm still not clear on data gathering and those other points.
Yeah, we responded to that email, and did that help answer some of those questions, or you still have questions?
I don't have a response to this.
I think Jennifer sent it, was it earlier this week?
I don't have that. So sorry.
So maybe I can help a little bit here. So first of all, as I said, this was an interim process. So when we went through the TIP adoption process last year, the council said it is no longer acceptable for you to bring us an unprioritized list. And so we worked to develop because we knew that the TSP would develop a highly vetted stakeholder community influenced prioritization process that would be our permanent thing going forward, you know, until the next TSP. We developed an interim process, but we used metrics and data, and we developed criteria by which we would rank these based on best practices. And so if it would be helpful, say for equity, for us to talk to you about how we developed equity, our priority equity areas, and what went into that, things like poverty, things like race and ethnicity, things like transit dependency, those kind of things that go into sort of identifying areas where we should be investing with an emphasis on equity. We can totally set up a time to walk you through that. Because it is informed by best practices. It does reflect best practices in the field. And it does reflect our policy direction from our council. So one thing that I think it's really important to understand is that while our council has said DEI is important, it's a priority for the city, and you know, we need to be thinking about it in everything they do, they have not defined what they mean by equity. and they're going to be going through a process. So what we did was look at best practices, what we know matters in terms of equitably investing in transportation infrastructure for people to move around. It means things like, are you transit dependent? Do you have disabilities? Where do students live? And what are the places that they need to get to? Are you low income? Where do we have a lot of multifamily housing where it's more typical that folks may be depending on modes other than driving alone? And we built those into a thing. So I think we may just need to spend some time, and we can do this next year for the tip, walking you all through that. And then we can really have a robust discussion about how, whether that makes sense and how we should weight these things relative to each other. Because I think that's what you really are getting at, Daria, is you just don't feel like you understand the back end. And Commissioner Ruggles, excuse me. And you know, I think we can go into it. The sort of challenge this year is we start this process. You know, we're going through the tip with you now and council now. We will start the process again in October or November. It's just an annual cycle. And so we didn't have the resources or the bandwidth in the commission to go through this in this level of detail this year, but we can next year,
So
if that's helpful.
It's a 6-year plan, but it's like reevaluated every year?
We update it every year. It's required to be updated every year by state and federal requirements for access to grant funding and other things, to be in compliance with lots of things. And so, yeah, so every year we have to update our 6-year plan.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. There are some, the meat of the components is what I don't understand. You know, obviously I'm not, you know, not that you're using jargon, but it's like, it's so 30,000 level. And again, I really do appreciate, you know, finding out how they relate to each other. But these things that actually create what this stuff is based on in terms of these values is what I'm not seeing, at least not so far.
Okay. So an objective criteria for, say, Chris, jump in here if I'm getting this wrong, but economic development was proximity to an established sub-area plan where we have employment focus. That's an objective criteria. You can weight things on that. This project is close to this. Like Southeast First is like right on the border of Section 30 sub-area, which is a place where we are planning for and generating large employment uses that support job growth in our community. So that's like, that's one measure like for economic development. So I think we can just, I think, does that help at all?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, I honestly, I feel kind of overwhelmed now because this is just so much information, you know, and I can't knit anything together that relates to these things that I'm concerned about, and that the reason I'm here, which has to do with, you know, profound inclusion and the diversity and the equity and all of that. And you know, so, and I guess, you know, honestly, the other thing is, and I know, Rebecca, this is, you know, maybe a little bit out of this structure, but, you know, transportation system. I mean, I guess one of the things I have trouble with is we're part of a system, and yet we don't have a systems approach. So one of the things I would love to see is like an executive summary and best practices and a deliberation of citizens that are not experts that come together, and the planning commission goes, hey, you guys, this, and housing goes this, because transportation is part of all of that. And this feels like it's disconnected from the larger vision of Vancouver for me.
Totally understand. I think we may want to just have a deep offline detailed conversation. That might be helpful.
Going to recommend that. I would like to recommend that we do that. We need to keep this on track. We have a lot of hands risen. We have a lot of other people with some inquisitive questions, and that's been noted, Commissioner Ruggles. That may be something that we can look forward to the city on providing a little bit more clarity on.
Thank you, Chair.
On how the scoring and the procedure. With that said, I want to move to the rest of these questions so we can get on with our topic. Commissioner Williams, you had your hand up first and longest. Do you have something quick for the Chris or Rebecca?
I'm sorry, Matt Herman, he had his hand up first, so I'm going to let him go.
Matt? Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams and Commissioner Payne. Chris, I really appreciate your work on this. I really appreciate you and your team putting together a prioritization for moving the community forward and representing the community. And I really appreciate your presentation. I do have a clarification that I'd like you to make, though. Regarding on slide 10, you mentioned that one of the policies is the multimodal policy, but multimodal is also a project type. So is there, it sounds like with the project types that the two are mutually exclusive regarding capital projects versus multimodal projects. Is there a different way of defining or separating the policy from the project type so that it's less confusing, maybe addressing the multimodal projects as either active transportation or something other, because you can achieve multimodal policies both in your capital projects as well as in what you consider multimodal projects, but I'd just like some clarification on that.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I mean, the policy is we want to improve options for all modes of travel. That's what that's what the policy is trying to say. And the projects are projects that are building sidewalk or building ramps or building bike lanes. So I can see what you're saying, and we can definitely change the name so that one is like multimodal or active transportation, just so there's not that confusion moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Where all the hands go. Commissioner Williams, quickly, you had something?
Yeah, I was, if there's there were the three categories: signals, multimodal, and let's call it, what was it?
Capacity.
Capacity. Okay. How do you arrive at how far down you go in a list? It's like, okay, we're done, at 55 points or whatever. Because it's not like they all have the same number of projects. They obviously have different numbers of points. You explained that very well. When is enough enough?
You mean like what is the score that where we might not do a project because it doesn't score high enough? Is that what you're getting at?
Oh yeah, or like using like on slide 11, capacity. What is it that says, okay, this is our list? It's not one more, it's not one less. Boom, this is it. How does that arrive?
Well, so keep in mind, this is the first year that we've done this. And so previous to this, really it was the projects that were on the funded list or the partially funded list were really projects that had grant money or that would score well with granting agencies. So that was where the list started. And so we're basically taking that existing list and just scoring those projects to see what the score would come out to be.
Okay,
now,
that makes sense.
But moving forward, future years, this transportation system plan prioritization, the more formal one that's going to be evaluated, that will start to dictate where and how we spend our transportation dollars in the future.
And might it also inform where you go out and ask for grants?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you very much.
So we'll take two more questions here from Commissioner Hardy and Commissioner Jackson before we take a quick break and move on. Commissioner Hardy, please. You're on mute.
Can Commissioner Jackson go first? Because I'm really interested in what she has to say before I speak. Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Mine's relatively quick. I do appreciate this update. It seems quite a bit more clear. And I also really like the annual update part. I think that was the part that we're looking at so many long-term things that I think some of us might have panicked and said, good Lord, if we can't have input, we're not going to have input anytime soon. So an annual update on that's very important. Also, I noticed in your letter to council, it said equity economic vulnerability map. Is there a way for me to access that or see where that is?
Rebecca or Jennifer, can you forward that map to the commission members?
I believe it's part of the TSP presentation that is later this evening. Yeah, so you'll actually see it next or tonight at some point.
Because I saw one that was called an equity focus area, but I wasn't sure if that was the same thing as the equity economic vulnerability map. I didn't know if they were two separate documents or just named differently in the different. So,
It's the same thing, just named differently.
okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardy.
Yes, I'd also like to to express my thanks for the additional clarification on some of this. In listening to Commissioner Ruggles, I would agree that those questions that she raised seem really important. And if those could be sent out so we can all see what they are, because if this new interim prioritization was crafted and developed by a group of people, is it the staff that did it? Is it consultants? It's even been stated in the Columbian that it was the TMC. So it's difficult to determine who actually put this kind of scoring together. And then if we're going to use this process that has been gone through for future projects, are we basing it on something that really has depth to it and can answer those questions that Commissioner Ruggles just asked us? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardy. With that said, I think, let me just confirm, Chris, I think you had mentioned that there could be a little bit more clarification, or Rebecca, that on the scoring process and how those are weighted. And that may be something I see, providing more information on, as we move forward, and get out of our interim situation. So we'll look forward to hearing some more on that. With that said, we're running a little bit behind on our agenda. I would like to offer everyone about 3 minutes. It looks like it's about 5:27. If everybody wants to run and refill the water bottle, take a quick break, stretch. We will be back here in about 3 minutes. So we will consider this a quick break.
Jennifer, are you going to continue to run the PowerPoint?
I think the one thing, Jennifer, would be that we were going to demo the crash dashboard from the web page, so potentially you could switch.
Yeah, I
to
mean,
me at that point.
here I can make you the host so you can run the presentation, whatever is easiest for you guys.
It looks like we have the ability to do a screen share. So if you just want to stop, and then Corinna can present her screen at that point.
Okay, yeah, just let me.
Oh, actually, I misspoke. It looks like host disabled participant screen sharing. So I think we will need.
So who should I make host? Should I make you, Tom, or should
no, why don't you do Corinna?
Corinna? Okay. Or I'll try making you a co-host, and you should be able to share, but let me know.
Okay.
If you have any issues.
Yeah, if not, I think there's actually a link to the dashboard in the presentation, so you could potentially pull it up and demo it too if you wanted to.
Okay.
It's funny how our animals tend to replicate their owners. You know, when it's snowy out in the backyard, I love to go out there and play, and my dog will go out there and gallivant around with me. But when it's hot outside, neither one of us want nothing to do with that backyard. It's brutal. So it looks like we have most everybody back. Try to get somewhat back on target here. So we'll go ahead and reconvene. We'll move on to our next agenda item, the informational item, which is the transportation system plan, reviewing the equity analysis, crash dashboard, and the public outreach process. I see a few unfamiliar names in front of me, so I'm just going to, I'll allow, I guess, Jennifer to introduce who our speakers will be on this topic. And I just, before we move on, wanted to, it looks like they're already gone, just appreciate Rebecca and Chris again for their input tonight. So with that said, Jennifer, if you'll introduce our next speaker, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Payne. So we have back tonight, we've got Tom Brennan with Nelson Nygaard, who is, as you mentioned, is going to be talking about kind of the equity analysis, vulnerability analysis, focus area. It's kind of had some changes in titles and how it's been used. And also the collision dashboard. So Corinna is also here as well. Corinna Kimball Brown is here, and she'll be talking about the collision dashboard. We did have some time on the agenda, and which is part of the presentation too, is an update on some of the public outreach that we've been doing. But given that we're behind schedule, we're going to just focus on the equity analysis and the collision dashboard tonight, and then bring back at next month an update on the public outreach. We had 2 really good roundtables last week, and we've got 2 more coming up in 2 weeks. So we'll be able to give you a little bit more information at next month's meeting anyway, based on how we're doing with those roundtable sessions. And I know Tom has to leave at 6 for another meeting, so I'll stop talking and just hand it over to you guys.
Thanks, Jennifer. Chair and commissioners, great to see you all again. I know it's been a few months since I was last on to talk about the transportation system plan update. And we do have a presentation, so maybe Corinne, if you're able to share that and move the slides, that would be great. I'm actually probably not going to do too much talking, since I was going to cover the third item that will push on to another meeting, which was just our update on the outreach work that we've been doing to date as part of the transportation system plan. Still quite a bit of time for us to come back and talk to you about that. I do think both the work we've been doing around equity, as well as some of the really great work our team has been doing on developing some tools for you all to analyze collisions in the community, are really important and foundational elements of the TSP. If you flip to the schedule there, Corinna, this is I think the same, roughly the same schedule that Rebecca had just put up. I think what you'll see is that we're really in the process of developing the vision, goals, and using outreach throughout the community to inform those critical foundational elements of the TSP. And I think it's interesting that we've just kind of gone through this conversation around the interim tip and how that was arrived at, because really what we want to do and will do in this process is sort of build from the ground up, hearing from the broader community through this planning process, what the community's goals and desired outcomes, and then build a robust evaluation framework by which the city can in the future determine and prioritize projects really based on a strong policy. So, we've been working for a while now with some delays and holds due to COVID. A lot of our early tasks have really been around getting the project up and running. A lot of work documenting kind of the state of mobility and existing conditions in the community. We spent a couple meetings talking to you and got some great feedback from the commission on that work. Where we are now, I think, is really a time where we'll start to ramp up quite significantly. And I think some of the work that we're doing now is helping to set a baseline for a number of important upcoming decisions and points in this process. And the two things that we'll talk about today, and Corinna Kimball Brown, who's here with me today, has been very involved in both of these, are helping us think about how within the transportation space, when we talk about equity, what does that mean, and how can we be consistent throughout not only the TSP process, but moving into the future in terms of how we think about areas of equity focus and what populations and characteristics help us to define that. And then similarly with the crash dashboard, I think you'll see this as a really important tool for us to kind of baseline where we're at in terms of collisions in the community, why those are happening, and really start to document important trends about safety on our streets. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corinna to talk a bit about this exciting work.
Thank you. The slide doesn't want to go forward. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to give some more details about the equity analysis we've been working on that was mentioned earlier in the context of the tip. Some overall context for this work is the City Council's commitment to work to make our transportation system safe, reliable, and equitable for all users. Within the City of Vancouver, there are multiple planning efforts currently underway with an equity focus, including the strategic plan update, the climate strategy, the reside plan, and equitable redevelopment efforts. And within the context of the region and the nation, we're seeing communities across the country have adopted census-based methods using census data to identify geographic equity focus areas. So the objectives of this exercise for the TSP is to create a tool that will center historically excluded community members in decision-making and outreach as well, to advance equity and to help inform future work and some of the ongoing work as the city works to advance and understand their own definition of equity and develop that a little bit more in the future. So to begin with, we did review best practices and research in this area that other cities have been doing recently. And from that, we just, sort of settled on some key demographic groups to identify census tracts in Vancouver where those groups represent a relatively greater share of the population. And those groups are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, households with low incomes, and we used a data set that is from the Housing and Urban Development that indexes the income to the price of housing in the area. So it's 80% of that HUD adjusted median family income. Then renters is the third group, and adults without a 4-year degree. So why these 4 groups? We initially actually took a look using just race and income, trying to kind of have just a laser focus on economic and racial equity. But we found that the results didn't quite reflect city staff's knowledge of the community and the sort of neighborhoods and areas that they expected to rise to the top. And there was also, I think, a desire to sort of be in line with some of the housing work that's happening right now. So we added additional factors related to economic vulnerability. I'm still trying to keep it simple, but that's where the rental and houses or adults without a 4-year degree comes in. And then just overall, we wanted to use data that has consistent geographic units, so it's easy to update in the future. And so all of the data we used does come from the American Community Survey, which is a program of the US Census and is at the census tract level. And I know, one question that has come up is, well, why not use students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch? But that's just an example of a really valuable data set, but that doesn't come at that census tract level, so it's harder to integrate into this analysis. So I'm going to show you, here's our draft results. And this is, there is a scoring system based on the percent of the population that falls within each of the demographic groups for each tract. So those orange tracts that you're seeing are the tracts that scored the very highest, and the yellow tracts are the ones that scored, above the threshold that we had set, but not quite as high as the orange tracts. And some ways that this analysis might feed into the TSP's work to advance inclusivity and equity these are just some examples that are based on things that we've seen other communities do. So one is to use the equity framework as part of a decision-making lens for transportation investments. As you've seen, they're incorporating this into the TIP prioritization. Another policy that we're seeing communities adopt is just greater transparency around funding decisions and sort of developing tools and policies around that. Just transparency and equity are friends. And another example of an equity-focused policy is as cities are starting to kind of come up with policies to address privately operated mobility services within their communities, they're often taking an equity lens to that. And some sort of more concrete ways that this can happen is through that prioritization of investment, and then also in the realm of public outreach, sort of doing a deeper outreach to equity communities of interests by creating a community liaison program to develop relationships around with historically marginalized groups. So these are all broader examples of how the TSP will be looking at equity. Not all of them are directly tied to the data on the map. But, and then we have some next steps. We've reviewed this analysis with Alicia, the new DI director, and are in the process of taking out the map and the analysis to the community to kind of get their feedback on is anything missing, either geographically or demographically. And I'll turn it over to Tom to ask a few questions, and we can go back and look at the map if we need to while we do that.
Thanks, Corinna. I saw a question popped up. DEI refers to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you may know, the city has a new new director who is in sort of a cross-cutting role, thinking about and implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and programs across the city. So it's been really good timing for us to be rolling out this work with her coming on board and having a chance to review and participate in the work that Corinna talked about. I think the one other thing I would just maybe add to what Corinna said here in the description of this work is that we understand that data is really important in doing this work, so we're taking this very seriously. We also recognize that to do equity work properly, we can't just rely on data. We need to have conversations. So we are working hard through the engagement process to be out and talking to BIPOC communities, talking to low-income communities, and have started some successful conversations recently, I think, that are also teaching us a lot that we won't learn from data. But I think, looking back to that map, and maybe you can flip back to that, Corinna, I think one question we want to ask is, just knowing the community, having, living in the community, does this seem to, reflect your understanding of what would you would expect from the type of data analysis that Corinna spoke about? Anything that surprises you?
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. Commissioner Jackson, looks like you had your hand raised. Did you have some questions
Yes,
for Thomas or
the
Corinna?
first question was just to clarify that this indeed is the map that they were using for the tip, that was referenced in the tip.
Great.
Yes, it is the map.
And the second part is, I guess for me, the little bit of a surprise is the Harney area where Harney Elementary is. Just as I had a child who went to school there and was well aware of the income levels around that area. So I was a little surprised to not see that. I know there's some high income homes there, but there's some definitely lower.
Yeah, and certainly, one challenge we have with any data of this type is there's lines that need to be drawn somewhere to form a boundary, and those are often imperfect in terms of different types of data sets. Those lines are drawn by the Census Bureau, and to serve a lot of different purposes. So sometimes they represent certain data better than others.
Okay, so, but are you, I guess I'm clarifying, but you're asking for our input as to things that we expected to see? Is that correct?
Yeah, no, so your input is fantastic.
Okay, lovely, because there were, yeah, I definitely would look at that area.
Yeah, thank you.
So I apologize. I didn't see who had their hand up next. Just going and looking at the list in front of me, Commissioner Rea would be up next.
I think I'm the latecomer. I think Ken and Daria were ahead of me. But I'm willing to go, right? Whatever.
You got the floor, Commissioner Rea. Go ahead.
Okay. So I noticed that the focus here on the data, because it's objective data, is based on people that actually have housing. I noticed an article in the Columbian or not in the Columbian, somewhere, about a significant fire that was had, and the emergency services couldn't get to the fire. They had to loop hundreds of feet of the hose to get to the fire. because of the homeless populations. And I don't know what to do about that, but it's becoming a dangerous situation. And there's a transportation issue in getting emergency services to these homeless areas. And probably isn't the best form to, I just think that needs to be talked about. That's all.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And, it is a data type that I know cities are, making increasing efforts given the houselessness challenges that we're having in the Northwest to collect. Since many of those populations are transient, it's not data that often holds well. But I think, it's something we can look into. It's not something that's currently collected by the U.S. Census Bureau in a locational way.
Right. I'm just worried that we need to be able to get to where we need to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be something that if there's something blocking access to residential populations or emergency services, that should probably be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Williams.
Kind of to tag on to that comment about the houselessness people. I'm wondering if you could use, what's that? There's an annual survey. I thought it's in January. Is it a 1 point of light or something? I forget what it's called. I'm wondering if that data set is valuable and useful for addressing the houselessness people. The place where Commissioner Raya was talking about, that is in one of the little orange sections. So that's good. My second, so that was just a comment. When I was looking through the report, looked at collision data. I said, 50% of the collisions are in these highlighted areas. I said, it's kind of interesting. But what does population is comprised in this map's highlighted areas?
The total population, or percent of Vancouver's population?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not have that number at my fingertips, but that's certainly something we could follow up and provide to you.
And then kind of a wonky question. I'm wondering, obviously 2020 census data isn't out yet, but it is going to include differential privacy algorithms, which if you drill down to a very granular level, leads to purposefully inaccurate data. And I'm wondering if this is going to, make things difficult for you in the future as we try to incorporate the 2020 data.
Yeah, that is one reason to use census tracts, which are not the smallest available. There's always a little tension between trying to get the most geographically specific smaller areas and trying to get less of a margin of error, right? When you have the larger areas, you have more accuracy. But when you have the smaller areas, you have more precision. But that was part of the thinking behind using tracts rather than block groups or blocks, which are smaller, is that they do have a lower margin of error.
Right. Then the final question is, I think the economic levels, if I recall, it says 80% of the HUD value for the area. And I'm questioning whether the area is the greater Portland area or is it greater Vancouver area? Because there's a huge difference.
Right. I believe that they do it at the city level, but I could confirm that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Commissioner Ruggles, you had some questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, first of all, yes, this is really exciting and thank you both. And I really appreciate this work. And I love this map because it's really visual and clean and, really gets right to the point and illustrates it. So I'm just curious, if, you know, you're talking about best practices and what kind of best practices has informed this, like, was there particular cities doing it well and that we're learning from, like this idea of community liaisons and innovation and public and private partnerships, like the idea of micro mobility. And I'm also wondering how much the harms of sprawl have informed this work. You know, there's this national awareness now of reparations of the harms of sprawl. And I'm wondering how this affects this, if at all.
Brandon, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the best practices, since I know you've been engaged in looking at some of those, and I can talk a little bit to the sprawl question.
Yeah, as far as best practices around, you mentioned community liaisons and some of the more outreach focused ones. There are a number of communities that have been working on equitable engagement processes that I'm familiar with. Both Seattle Department of Transportation and King County Metro in the Seattle area have formed like equity cabinets to help guide some of their transportation planning processes, which is really going even a step beyond just a liaison and forming an actual committee. San Jose has actually done that, kind of bringing the two topics together. The city of San Jose is working on an equitable new mobility plan. So it's both addressing, you know, some of the questions around micro mobility and, you know, Lyft, Uber type of companies, and with a real equity focus, having a community commission made up of representatives of community-based organizations that are really guiding that work and are really co-leaders. And just in terms of liaisons, you know, there's also a number of places, including Portland, that are kind of working on their contracting practices to be able to make it easier to actually contract with community members or community-based organizations to have them lead outreach work. So these are all, you know, sort of big, longer term equity practices in outreach that I've looked into.
Yeah, thanks, Corinna. And the sort of equity impacts and harms of suburban sprawl could be a many hours long conversation. I will see one of the trends that we're seeing dramatically in the industry and around the country in the last several years is that the affordable housing crisis and the particular demand for housing in close to job center neighborhoods has had a really dramatic impact on transportation accessibility. I know this is certainly true in the broader Portland region, and Vancouver is experiencing it. And I think what that looks like is generally people who may have been able to find affordable rent close to a downtown, close to a job center, close to a school, are now being forced to live really at the edge of the region, the edge of our communities, where we know that the street networks are challenging. It's public transit access is poor. There may be missing sidewalks to get to the bus stop. The bus service tends to be poor. Options for cycling or other modes may be lesser. So we're really finding that a lot of those populations that we're talking about in this conversation are suddenly kind of now living on the very edges of our community and having trouble accessing resources. I know I mentioned we're starting to have some community conversations with these folks that are part of these populations, and one of the conversations we had recently was with a young low-income Black woman living in Far East Vancouver who recounted quite emotionally her challenges of getting to school on the west side, involving challenging trip, 12-minute walk with a less than high quality sidewalk environment, free buses to get to school essentially. So I think those are the types of impacts that we're seeing more and more.
Commissioner Jackson, did you have a question?
I think Commissioner Hardy might want, I've already had a chance, so I can go last.
Okay. Commissioner Hardy, you're on deck.
Mine's more of a reflection. Commissioner Riggles has often reminded us of the whole concept of community liaison, partnerships, collaboration. And in the workshop on Monday for the city, the whole workshop, the first workshop was about homelessness, and there's a new director. I think her last name is Spinelli, but I can't remember exactly. And then we have, and she's fairly new, and then a DEI director, I guess, who's fairly new. So in kind of looking at it through the lens of Commissioner Ruggles, will there be kind of any collaboration with some of these new directors that are coming on and looking at this also?
Absolutely, and I think Corinna had mentioned that we're already working with Alicia, who is the new city's new diversity, equity, and inclusion director. She's reviewed these materials and provided some really valuable input to us already, and we expect to continue to do that.
Yeah, and just to follow up, so we have met with Alicia and they have reviewed this, and we've also talked with them about some other potential processes that we're doing. So we are working on a pilot program to establish a community-based organization process where we can basically compensate organizations for their time or provide stipends to people as well. So we are piloting that as part of the transportation system plan. And so at the roundtables that we did last week and the roundtables that will be coming up, we provided $50 Fred Meyer gift cards to participants to provide some compensation for their time, knowing that for a lot of people it can be challenging to take time out of their day. And then we are also in the process of setting up some I guess, kind of stronger relationship with some of the community-based organizations in the community, to where, again, we can pay them by the hour for their time or for other types of services that they provide the city. So we're just in the initial phases of that, but we can share more about that at a later time once we get that more developed.
Jennifer, that's great news.
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a question on the community roundtable discussions that happened. If we could potentially see a recording of those discussions, who attended, just to give a better sense of these conversations. Was it just the one person that shared their story? Was there multiple stories that can help inform our work here? I'm always just curious to see who actually makes it to the table. It's not just about having that table set out for people.
So we can send out a list. I don't believe those were recorded at all. Jennifer, you may tell me differently. We are taking notes, and we'll have a recap of those. We have conducted 2 and have 2 more upcoming in a few weeks, and have had multiple participants for both. So I have, I think, found it incredibly valuable so far, and really want to continue to lean on that approach of talking directly with people in the BIPOC, low income communities as a way to get some of those important stories.
Yes.
So I don't have all the names on the top of my head, but we can certainly provide you an update.
Yeah.
After the meeting.
Just to confirm, so we did not record them, but we can provide the names of the participants. And then, like Tom was saying, we took very detailed notes. And my hope is that Eddie Monteo can come back at next month's meeting and share more about the public outreach and the roundtables. He has some really good insights from those. And so I would, yeah, I'd love to be able to have further discussion with you and share some more information about that. But we had, I believe, 3 participants at the first one and 2 at the second one, which may not seem like a lot, but it gave us a really good opportunity to have some really in-depth and very good conversations with people.
Great, thank you. And sorry, final question. Were these, so as the COVID guidelines loosen up a little bit and we are able to meet in groups, are you considering any in-person opportunities, especially for those folks in central Vancouver?
I'll go ahead and take that, Tom. So yes, we are definitely talking about that, and that will definitely be part of kind of the continued and increased public outreach that we'll be doing over the summer. So we're excited, with people being vaccinated and the ability to, we would still follow the proper, social distancing and masking requirements if necessary, depending on what's in place at the time. But yeah, we're excited that we'll be able to have more of those in-person meetings, like you said, particularly for those people that don't have access to like online capabilities or that type of technology.
Thank you.
All right, so we can kind of keep on our schedule. We'll take one more call here from our Commissioner Jackson, or one more question. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. So in the collection of the data, you said that we were not taking account for free and reduced lunch. But is it possible as an organization, you were asking for people to vet that there might be someone from the school districts who could look at your map and give you an assessment if there's some areas that you may have missed on here? Because I know, for instance, Evergreen School District has someone who's assigned to assist people who are currently unhoused or living in their cars, helping them with their students. And then, yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I guess I will make one thing clear. There are certainly very useful and interesting pieces of data that we will use within the TSP process that were not included in this particular index. The intent of this is for something that can be updated on a regular basis using a consistent data set. There may well be other purposes or specific aspects to our work that we'll want to look at some of that school district data. So appreciate that, and we will we'll be using lots of different data as we go through the process.
Thank you. Was there, just to follow up, was there anything that you wanted to present on the crash dashboard? Is that something that you're prepared to bring forward?
I guess maybe I would ask you, Chair. I think it's a pretty involved piece of work and something that would be, I think, important for you guys to have some time to consider. If your agenda cuts us off at 6:10 and it's 2 minutes before that now, it's also something we could bring back at a later time too. Because I would guess once you see it, you'll have many questions.
No, that would be great. I would really welcome that coming back, because I know that I, for one, would be very interested in hearing that. I'm sure other people would too. So we'll look for a little bit more input on that when we talk about the roundtable and our outreach in the next meeting. So
great.
Commissioner Hardy, you had one last question?
No, I just like to reiterate what Commissioner Jackson said, as far as taking a look at the free and reduced lunch and maybe a little bit more contact with the school districts, because that does provide some good information, especially related to our school-age children.
Great, thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you. Well, Thomas, Corinna, I really appreciate your input, your involvement, you guys showing up tonight and sharing all that information with us. It's very valuable and helpful for us to see our way forward with that. So I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Thank you to the members of the commission. We appreciate your time.
Thank you both so much. Thank you.
So with that said, we'll move forward to our 6:10 item on the agenda for our community communication. Jennifer, I understand we have one or two participants this evening. If you would please bring them up, we will allow them to have the floor.
So I've received notification from one community member that wanted to share a comment tonight, and then I also forwarded you their email as well that they provided information on. There's several other participants that have been participating. So I don't know if there's anybody else that would like to speak tonight. I don't know if you have the ability, if you want to send me a message in the chat, if you'd like to make a comment at tonight's meeting as well. I know we have the deadline set for 2 o'clock, but we'll allow additional people to comment if they're interested. So just let me know through the chat and I will go ahead. So Dawn was the one person that had sent me information. And so let me figure this out here. So I will go ahead and promote you to panelist Dawn. The screen might kind of time out a little bit and swirl and think about it, but you should be able to move up to a panelist. And so once I promote you to a panelist, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a warning at when you have about 30 seconds left. And then I just have we've got kind of a public kind of meeting conduct sheet that's up for people to view as well. So you should be a panelist now, Dawn. If you can turn your camera on and your sound, it's showing that you're unmuted.
I think you can hear me now. Is that correct?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Don Steinke. I'm a retired science teacher. I taught mostly at Fort Vancouver High School. 5 years ago, I asked a member of a different planning commission what they were doing about climate change. He said, that's for Congress to deal with, not us. Well, it turns out that Congress will never act because there are too many senators from oil and gas states. That's why we believe we must act locally, and doing that will inspire others to act. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that if we reduce emissions about 50% by 2030 and get to net zero by 2050, we can avert some of the worst consequences of climate change. Our legislature recently adopted emission reduction targets consistent with the IPCC. To reach our goals, we need to reduce emissions about 9% per year starting now. We can't do that if we continue business as usual. We must transition to public transportation and vehicle electrification as soon as possible. Investments in sprawl and road widening projects is money not available for public transit. Public transit should be so good that people would rather take it than drive. Basically, business as usual forces people to drive. Last month, Governor Inslee signed the Clean Fuel Program, the Climate Commitment Act, and the HEAL Act. As I understand it, the Climate Commitment Act is an improved version of California's Cap and Trade program. According to economists, cap and trade is the most cost-effective method for reducing pollution in some sectors. The Clean Fuel Program and the Climate Commitment Act will raise money. By 2037, over $5 billion will go into an historic investment in mass transit, bicycles, and pedestrian infrastructure, and transportation electrification. Billions more will go to other projects like forest management to deal with annual wildfires that threaten lives and livelihoods across our state. Last year, there were 21 climate-related events that cost at least $1 billion in the United States. Those types of events are happening globally and hurting our economy and quality of life. We tried to amend the Growth Management Act this year to require you to create policies to reduce vehicle miles traveled, but we ran out of time. But you can do that on your own regardless. The greatest threat to the planet is to think someone else will save it. Thanks for your service, and try to include climate and vehicle miles traveled reduction in all your planning. Thank you. And I could take questions if you want.
May I ask a question?
Yes, for me.
Do we have time for it?
Go ahead, Commissioner, identify.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Valenta. I was just wanting to ask, how do you suggest that we can do something incrementally relatively small and feasible in the next little while? That's something that is
Steer money,
feasible. Yeah.
steer money away from road widening projects and for projects that will induce sprawl, and direct it to public transit. And also, this is not exactly transportation, but closely related to it. Anytime pavement is poured in a multifamily complex without conduit or wires for a plug, that means that new complex will be basically tied to the fossil fuel industry for the rest of the century. And so that's a barrier to clean energy. And I'm glad somebody mentioned San Jose, because there's somebody in Vancouver named Sean Deniston who wrote some of the San Jose plans that would make them be equitable, like you'd mentioned, and also to have wires installed underneath pavement for charging plugs. So that would be my quick answer for what you could do, but steer money away from the wrong places. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner
Thank
Williams,
you.
did you have a question?
Actually, it was just, I was hoping to get a question edgewise to Jennifer, but after all of the citizen commentary.
Thank you. We'll be giving that an opportunity here in just a moment. Ken?
Chair Payne,
Thank you, Don.
we have one more person that would like to speak. It's David Benedictus.
Perfect.
So I'll go.
Perfect. Thank you, Don. I appreciate your comments. They've been entered into, and for the record, the letter that you had mentioned earlier, Jennifer, was a copy of the statement that Don had read, so it has already been reflected on public record. So please introduce the next speaker.
Okay. Let me pull it up here. Okay, David, you should be promoted to a panelist. So if you can unmute.
There we go. And I'll even show my face. Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. My name is David Benedictus. I've lived at Northeast 49th Street in the Truman neighborhood, which is just on the other side of SR 500, but very close to the city. In fact, I was chair of the neighborhood association when we were dealing with a traffic revision on SR 500, and they had a lot of communication with WSDOT in the city and the county in that regard. So I'm really excited about what we're doing here, and as a healthcare professional and nurse educator, I've become aware of how this all links these transportation impact on public health and what we now refer to as the social determinants of health. And for example, in studies done by the American Hospital Association show that each year, 3.6 million people in the United States do not obtain medical care solely due to transportation issues. So when you think about what we were doing with trying to get the vaccines out to people, many people were challenged because they didn't have transportation to get there, right? And then in 2018, while I was researching a class, I taught at Clark College on next generation artificial intelligence. I found that current demographic and economic trends are changing, and consumers' preferences are there for non-auto travel, just as Don was talking about. Surveys indicate that many people would prefer to drive less and rely more on other modes and live in more walkable and bikeable communities. So we've got this community interest behind all these changes. For example, in the National Association of Realtors 2017 survey, they found that a lot of people liked walking, 80%, driving is 73%, and half like biking, and 38% like public transportation, but nearly 60% report that they're being forced to drive due to inadequate alternatives. And then you get into the public health issues around EPA studies, and 75% of carbon monoxide pollution is caused by vehicle transportation and the ambient fine particulate matter and air pollution is responsible for 85,000 to 200,000 excess deaths per year in the United States. So this is all, you know, in the background here, and the reason why we need to move on this quickly and in big ways. And then in terms of equity, in the recent article study published in the National Journal just in April, called National Inequality in Pollution Exposure, states that racial, ethnic, and social economic disparities in air pollution exposure in the United States are responsible for premature deaths in those communities through lung and heart disease. So when we look at the social determinants of health, the health of our community is very much like the health of the individual. When our physiological regulatory systems are affected by social and environmental stressors caused by not having good transportation and poor quality air, etc., they start to overwhelm our capacity for our immune systems to respond, and we develop cancers, and it's connected to, through many, many studies, to chronic diseases, right? So on the other hand, we know that healthy communities with innovative multimodal transportation infrastructure promote individual health and reduce healthcare costs. So we're on the right track here in Vancouver, and again, I thank you for all you're doing, and anything I can do to help out with that, even though I live in the county still, but I'm just right over the border. I'm glad to participate in the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Don. We appreciate hearing from the community. I do believe that wraps up our community involvement this evening, our community communication. With that said, we'll open up the next agenda item for our commission communication. Commissioner Williams, I saw your hand raised a moment ago. Did you have something that you would like to start us off with?
Yeah, I was going back to the schedule slide on the TSP that was presented, kind of two different versions, but the same question popped into my mind. And one of them is that it indicates that goals and objectives for the TSP have, if not already locked down and frozen, but they're very close. And the next phase, starting in July, I think, is identifying solutions, at which point there would be community involvement for what do you think about these solutions. My question, I think, Jennifer, is there any feedback from the community or from this commission on what are the objectives of the TSP? What are the goals?
Sorry, I am just pulling up the presentation again, because you're right. The presentation that Nelson Nygaard had the old slide. And that should have, I think that was just miscommunication on our part for the presentation that they should have had. So let me pull that back up again. So
It was up one on slide 5.
oh, did I already? I passed it. There it is. So yeah, it was a little bit challenging kind of how to show this visually, but we are just at the very, very beginning of kind of talking about the goals piece of it. So that really started with the roundtables that we had last week. So there will definitely be a role for the TMC in this, and nothing has been set yet in terms of the goals or visions or objectives for the plan. What we're starting with the TSP to kind of initiate that conversation with the community and at those roundtables is we have a values wheel. And so it's a wheel that's been put together by Nelson Nygaard with feedback from staff. And there's basically a process that we're asking people to go through to kind of prioritize their values. So we're starting with a values-based discussion with the community and also with you in terms of how we kind of start to develop some of those goals, some of those draft goals and visions based off of the community values. So again, we just started it. The first time we shared it was last week at the roundtables. And we're working on a process to where it can be kind of a survey device that we can have up on the website and kind of distribute more widely into the community, have hard copies for people if they need that. And so that's going to be what's happening over the next few months, is having that values-based discussion with the community and developing those draft goals and vision for the plan. So there's definitely a role for the TMC in that.
Okay, because I was looking at I guess it's the work plan that we distributed beginning of April. And I guess our next time we look at the TSP is in August or something.
Yeah, and we probably what we're going to do is, since we didn't get to the collision dashboard tonight and also the public outreach from the roundtables so far, is that we can bring that values wheel discussion to the group as well in July. And so we'll bump that up again. We're a little bit kind of behind the timeline on the work plan, or what we're now calling the advanced agenda. It's more of like a tool for us to set the agendas for the meetings. So that's in the process of actually being updated right now. So yeah, definitely there's going to be some changes to that. And the July meeting will just be really focused on kind of the TSP components.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ramos, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So in response to David and Don's comments, that made me think of if there's any update on the climate action strategy for the city of Vancouver. I think the last time that we met, I asked about it, and it sounded like council maybe was entering their retreat to discuss it or something like that. If you could provide an update on where we are with that, so that we can kind of go beyond including climate as a buzzword when we're talking about transportation, and be able to align it with what the city's goals are.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't know, and I can do some follow-up and send it out to everybody. I don't know exactly where they're at with the climate piece specifically. So I know they had a workshop earlier in the year, but I don't know what's been happening since then. But they did have some retreats on kind of reshaping their strategic goals or their strategic values. So they have the adopted strategic plan from about 6 years ago, and they wanted to kind of do an interim update on that. So they looked at some new kind of values, and one of them is climate change, climate policy, and I should remember the others. One was courage. I remember that. And the other two, I can't remember offhand. So I'll email you the link to that. There was a document that was developed, and it's kind of hard to find on the council website. You have to really dig to find it. That outlined kind of their retreat process and kind of their new kind of goals and values that they'll be kind of shaping decisions off of. So I can send that to you, and then I'll follow up in terms of specifically the climate piece and where they're at in that process.
Yeah, that would be great, just to give our community members some context, and the other fellow commissioners. You know, as I'm in my 20s, so it feels like climate action is absolutely, you know, should be at the center with equity. It feels like my children are not going to be able to enjoy a lot of the same activities that we have today, because things are changing fast. I am the son of farm workers, so I think about all of the people, day laborers, who head outside on days like today to keep our country moving. So climate is really important, and hopefully we can convey to City Council and help them move along as well.
Heartily concur. Thank you.
So you picked a really good day to bring up climate change, I think. This is for Leah over there. You just look hot. Sorry. All right. Does anyone else on the commission have anything else that they would like to bring forth before we turn this back over to staff for their final communication tonight?
No, I had a statement, but I feel like with some of the information that we got, I have to, I have to edit it. But I do have to say to the, was it Commissioner Ramos? Did you just speak? Goes very
Yes,
much,
I did. Yep.
goes very much to what you said, but it doesn't feel quite appropriate in its current form. So withdrawing for tonight.
Thank you for that update. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say this evening before we Jennifer brings it home?
Sorry, I'll jump in real quick, just because David did mention the hurdle that people have to jump to get vaccinated. So I volunteer with Fourth Plane Forward, and we're putting on a series of vaccination clinics on the Fourth Plane corridor at the River City Church. I figure the more people know about it, the better the word gets out. So I can forward that information to Jennifer to get forwarded to all of you. But the goal is to bring it to working families, transit-dependent families who haven't been able to make that 30 to 50-minute trip down to Tower Mall or the fairgrounds.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Actually, I kind of still want to read this. Chair, can I? I mean, are you okay with it? I mean, some of this stuff, there is something that is informed from it tonight, but I feel like I wrote this for us, for you guys. I wanted to have a statement and I wrote something, and I guess I still would like to read it if that's okay.
Floor is all yours.
Okay, please forgive the stuff that is like probably, no longer, anyway. So, okay. Thank you for yielding this time, Chair. Even as I recognize the pandemic has made for a uniquely difficult year, I find I must speak out because I am feeling confused and ineffectual. I thought things were going to become clear as we go, but my tenure is over in a few months and I feel honestly just as disoriented as I did when we began. I volunteered for this commission because transportation planning is vital to the future of a visionary Vancouver. I expected us to be informed by an innovative, collaborative approach, one that is inclusive and that respects the facts of climate change, the historic harms of sprawl, and the unequivocal call for true equity and access for all people, regardless of age, ethnicity, economic limitations, or mobility issues. This is not what's happening. Transportation system, it's in the name. We are part of a system, so why are we not part of a systems approach to planning? Transportation is an integral part of a whole. Shouldn't we be working hand in hand with other vital parts? Housing. Transportation touches everything, so should planning it. I did not understand Mr. Malone's presentation as it related to a future we are invited to affect. In fact, some changes, some images that he had look just like business as usual, which is widening and creating more sprawl, the ineffectiveness and continued demonstrable harms of which have a name: induced demand. Quote, in an expensive effort to curb congestion in urban regions, we have overwhelmingly prioritized one strategy. We have spent decades and hundreds of billions of dollars widening and building new highways. Yet this strategy has utterly failed to solve congestion, as reported by Transportation for America. With respect, Mr. Malone did not address my concerns or questions about sprawl, grid versus arterial, or equity, the process by which equity and inclusion are to be measured and applied in the TIP plans. I did not know what I was meant to understand. But you know what I did understand? That we're talking about millions of taxpayer dollars. Everyone pays taxes. Therefore, we must plan for all of us. The fact is that every transit trip begins and ends with a human being. There is a causative connection between sprawl and climate, health and life expectancy, systemic racism, and rampant pedestrian deaths. How is this body not being more directly informed by these facts and also some timely actions by elected officials? President Biden issued the first ever executive order for the financial sector to address the climate crisis. And here are some notable news quotes from the New York Times. Choices individuals make are deeply shaped by the infrastructure we have built. We're almost forcing everyone to drive. President Biden's plan challenges the centrality of the automobile in American life. Helping Americans drive less will be crucial to meeting the administration's climate goals. Far too many Americans lack access to affordable public transit. We have the power to change that. And what about our governor? Climate change is a health issue, an economic issue, and an equity issue. Governor Jay Inslee signed the historic Climate Commitment Act and environmental justice legislation. Climate action was tied to funding a clean transportation package. Even the International Energy Agency, the world's most influential energy modeling agency, is now calling an end to the licensing and finance for new fossil fuel extraction. What happens at the federal level matters in Vancouver, and what happens in Vancouver matters in the world. We are undeniably connected. If nothing else, COVID-19 showed us this. It's simple. Fossil fuels pose a clear and present danger and must phase out. This is a known directive from the highest, most credible sources. Here in Vancouver, we fought off a huge proposed oil terminal at our port, and our honorable city council has held a moratorium on fossil fuel projects. Meanwhile, the city of Vancouver is currently developing a climate action roadmap to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to levels consistent with the goals established by the Washington State Legislature. A Brazilian planner says, cars cause 50% of the emissions and should be treated like your mother-in-law. You have to get along, but don't let her control your life. I respectfully ask my colleagues, what should inform us and what are we laboring to create? How do we facilitate the process by which we consider and learn from the lived experience and voices of marginalized people in our community? Can we kindly be guided by professionals with deep knowledge in DEI, with appropriate degrees, expertise for facilitation, public engagement, public discourse, and germane analysis of public policy for the layperson in order to make the best possible recommendations to City Council? If we are given these tools, together, we can help make a Vancouver that is not exploited and endangered by fossil fuels, and where human beings come first. Where healthy, sustainable, reliable, and visionary transportation choices deliberately planned for result in a safer, more inclusive, and beautiful place for all of us to be. I want to be part of an informed, effective Transportation and Mobility Commission that honors the inherent humanity of mobility. And that is a simple thing. Thank you very much, my esteemed colleagues. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Commissioner Ruggles. That's very insightful. I appreciate that. Commissioner Ramos, your hand is still up. Have you anything else to add to this before we are?
No, I apologize. I'll lower my hand now.
I did that earlier. I raised my hand too, and I realized I should have just kind of, well, anyway, I guess I hit myself alongside the head with it while I had it up there. Jennifer, would you be so kind as to finish up for staff communication, please?
Yeah, so let's see, I've got a couple things. So I've been kind of sending emails to you about, or forwarding emails to you from the help desk. So just a reminder, I know it seems kind of like a pain to have to change your password every 90 days, but it's something that we're used to, and it's something that's just a security measure for the city. So if you could try to do that by June 8th, that would be great. You'll get locked out if you don't, but you can just, you'd have to go through that kind of same process of setting up an account again. So it's just some extra steps if you aren't able to. So if you could do that. And then we talked a little bit about what we previously called the work plan, but now we're calling it the advanced agenda, because that's really what it is kind of laying out what our vision is for the agendas for the TMC meetings for the year. So I'll be in the process of updating that and send that out to you. But we do have, like we talked about, for July, we'll just be working on the transportation system plan. So the collision dashboard, the update on the public outreach, and then we can have the values wheel discussion with you as well. So we'll bring the team back from Nelson Nygaard and have those conversations with you. And because I believe what I had planned was to have a discussion about the pavement management program, and then maybe the financial program, which you got some of with the grant discussion. So those ones we can move around a little bit. But we'll be sending out a revised advanced agenda. And then I just wanted to let everyone know too that, or just to remember that staff is here to help. If you have questions or need further information, that's what we're here for. We want to support you. We want to help you out. And, you know, sometimes we can make some mistakes, be a little unresponsive, but please pester us. You know, let us know if there's something that you need, because we want to support you and make this as successful as possible. So don't hesitate to reach out to us, especially if you haven't heard anything from us. It can get busy and a little crazy, and things can get missed sometimes. So yeah, and then I also wanted to just, Commissioner Ruggles, you had mentioned that your term is up, but you have the ability, if you're interested in doing at least 2 more terms on the commission. And so we'll reappoint those if you're interested. We just had to stagger the first year appointments, so we didn't have everybody like every cycle turning over. So please, if you're interested in participating or continuing your participation in the commission, don't think that your term ends in a few months. You're more than welcome to, you know, submit another application. And it's up to city council again to assign people to the commission. But typically when somebody's already on a board or commission and they're interested in doing so, and they have the ability in terms of term options left, then there's a lot of times where people are reappointed. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Actually, I have a question. May I be recognized for that, Chair?
You have the floor.
It is, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
It is for you, Jennifer. I had signed up, I guess everybody got this, but I signed up for the Envisioning Safety, Health, and Justice seminar. And I don't know what happened, but I didn't get the link I was supposed to get. And then I sent an email to Jan, and I guess it just, I don't know, it fell through the cracks. But anyway, I was just wondering if, because that was something that I would like to have attended, and I did create time on my calendar to do so. Is there a way for us to get, like, you know, the executive summary of that, or is this just gone? And will there be another opportunity for something that is so germane to these themes that we have been discussing?
That is a good question. And I don't know if anybody else attended. I didn't attend. It was not on my calendar, and it got missed by me too. So if somebody else attended, they typically will send a link about a follow-up, you know, information or where that can be accessed. If nobody here on the commission attended it, then I can follow up. And yeah, Jan has been out of the office unexpectedly. And so that's why I'm covering tonight. And that's probably how that kind of maybe fell through too.
Commissioner Jackson, did you have something final to finish up with?
Yeah, I just was wondering, are we using our city email addresses?
You should be. We would like you to. We encourage you to.
It just seems like most of the information I'm getting is coming through my other email address. So I just wondered if I see some thumbs up. So maybe I'm not the only one, but I didn't get all the documents for this meeting. I got them through my personal address, not through my city address. So I'm just wondering. I don't know.
They should be coming to your city address. And I think we've been including them, your personal and your city ones, in communication, because there's just, I think people have kind of found it challenging to use the city email. And David can probably articulate this better, but we encourage you to use the city one, because there is a potential, if you're using your personal email addresses, that could open you up to a public disclosure request at some point. But I don't know, David, if you want to clarify that more or speak to that more as to why we encourage you to use the city one.
Yeah, because you're members of a government commission, the records that are associated with that are all part of your government records. The question is, if somebody wants to request an email that was sent out to all the commission members, normally it's easy for the city to perform that search if we just have to search your city issued email address. It does make it more complicated and potentially invasive if we have to say to you, hey, somebody put in a request for these records, we think your personal email address may have some of these records. You know, in order to be responsive, we need to go through them. I think we'd all rather not do that. So to the extent that anything discussing the commission, if we can keep that on the city issued email addresses that were set up for that purpose, that will
Okay.
make things a whole heck of a lot easier.
Almost all the emails I'm getting are coming to my personal address. I check my city email address all the time. I don't know if I'm the only one, but the only thing that came about this meeting to my city address was the invitation for the login.
Okay, I'll,
Same here.
yeah,
Same
okay.
thing here. I can't access my city email. I've gotten a couple of emails, but never have I received an email with instructions on how to re-access it.
Okay.
Everything that I've gotten, I've followed the directions on that. And I keep seeing that I'm supposed to get another email with instructions to log
I got
back in
some
again.
help today, Mario, and the really sweet girl named Kelly, and she helped me in 2 minutes because mine wouldn't work. It was taking me in circles. And I really thought, oh, I've already done this. So I didn't realize it had to be done again. But the little help desk or Kelly is really helpful. And David, I have one question for you. Is this still true, even if they're just forwarding additional information? In other words, you know, they're not giving me new information, because I did appreciate some of the stuff that hey, heads up, don't miss this. That, that's the way I was thinking of that we would be having our personal email accessed.
Well, the question becomes, if the city believes that there may be a record in your personal email, we'd have to look for it. So that's the issue, is just, no, I think we'd probably be fine at this point if we say, hey, just send me anything you had that pertains to the commission, and you just forward that to us, and we'd look it over and presume that it's fine in most cases. But we don't want to get too far down the road to a point where we have to go through and do a more comprehensive search. So just, you don't have anything to worry about if you've not been using a city email to this point, but down the road it could be more of an issue. So to the extent that staff can help get everybody up and running with that, just contact Jennifer and that, or IT, or both, and they can help you. But for right now, what we would typically do is a request came in, say, hey, just somebody requested this from all commissioners. If you have an email, forward that.
Can I respectfully request an email from you, Jennifer, to re-engage me with the help desk and get that done? And it doesn't work in my regular inbox. I've got like 3 or 4 other email addresses, but I can't get it to work with my email program because of the security stuff that's on the city stuff. So it's another place for me to go to have to find stuff. And I don't like that, because now it's another rock in my backpack that I have to carry around and remember to go check that email. I prefer all my email to go in the one box, because I check that numerous times during the day and I don't miss anything. So I appreciate you sending it to my personal email. I have no problem continuing to do that, but whatever I need to do, just make it happen. If you would, please.
Compromise between that. Is there something, like, not to make it harder for staff, but if there's something important and we get a heads up, check your city email, maybe that will solve it. Because I missed the very first onboarding meeting, which was really upsetting to me because I've been waiting and waiting. But I really thought, oh, there was a message, oh, we're not going to do this. And then so I didn't bother to look. Why would I? Like Mario, I've got enough rocks in my backpack. I got enough stuff, and multiple emails. So I ended up, missing it because of that. And I would have appreciated just a, hey, I know you weren't expecting to hear from us, but please check your city email after all.
Yes, we can do that. And then I'll definitely look at our distribution list to see if it's including both city emails and personal emails. And then Mario, I can connect you with the help desk so we can try to get this figured out, hopefully.
Thank you.
So the last thing I'd like to add here, just to recap real quick and confirm this with Jennifer, on the May minutes that were not adopted tonight, will the city be summarizing that a little bit further for us to address and adopt in the next? meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
The subcommittee on the collaboration compact will, we appreciate Commissioner Jackson, Rhea, Ruggles, and Valentera on volunteering for that. And we'll look forward to seeing something from you guys no later than July 1st, so we can bring that to approval for our next meeting. With that said, everyone stay cool, stay informed, stay connected. Commissioner Hardy, did you have something you want to say on our way out?
Yes, and if we can get those questions that Commissioner Ruggles asked about, and maybe some response to those, or at least we all at least see the questions. Thank you. Just to thank you.
Clarification on, and that was a clarification on the scoring of your the diversity.
If we could see those questions that Commissioner Ruggles asked and sent to staff, if we could all see those, and then if there's any kind of response to them that we could also see. Thank you.
Read the, if you haven't, Teresa, read the memo, the city memo. It's got a lot of really good information in it about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If no one has any further, no,
Everybody.
last chance. Everyone have a wonderful evening. We'll adjourn this meeting at 6:51 and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Oh, David, that cat, your animals. All right, good night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you so much.